Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Bijou. I'm a Master Sergeant, retired back in 2003 from the Army. I was drafted back in '68. I went in kicking and screaming, didn't want to be there. 29 years later, I came out kicking and screaming, didn't want to come out. Some people you just can't please. But I served in Vietnam from '68 to '69, and then after Vietnam, I took the uniform off, threw it to the ground, and said I'd never put it on again. Never say never, because a couple of years later, I was with MPs, military policemen. When Saddam started acting up in '90 and '91, they mobilized us to go over to Desert Storm. One of my soldiers came to me and he says, "Sarge, didn't you serve in Nam?" I says, "Yes, I did." He says, "Then you shouldn't have to go to Desert Storm." I says, "It's not one war per customer." It's as many as... But I loved my time in uniform. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised that I can still fit it. When my friend here says, "You want a free meal, follow me." So as always, I'm always open for a free meal. But I appreciate the fact that of what you guys are doing here. This is quite a museum. You know, I've got friends that would die to see something like this. So I'm going to make sure I tell them about it. Maybe by next year they will come. But I appreciate the welcoming, the people, how everybody has treated me here. I appreciate things like that. I really do. You know, I don't know how many times I've been in a restaurant and I'm wearing my Vietnam cap, and my wife and I were done eating, and I get ready to pay the bill, and the waitress tells me it's already been taken care of. And I can never find the person. It's like the Lone Ranger, you know, he's gone. But I really appreciate everything that this country has to offer. Not everything, because there's some things that I care not to talk about, but the good things that this country has to offer. And I'll fight to my death to keep it in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck's favorite song. Mine too. Outside of the barracks, by the corner light, I'll always stand and wait for you at night, the whole night through for you, Lily Marlene. For you, Lily Marlene. Vor der Kaserne, vor dem großen Tor, steht sie nackt Laterna und steht sie nackt davor. So wollen wir uns wiedersehen, bei der Laterna wollen wir stehen, mit dir, Lily Marlene, mit dir, Lily Marlene.
We always have some kind of a military theme, and so this year's theme is about me.
Cool. Yay.
This is a trip to Japan in 1949, and I'm an Army brat, and we just left the Philippines. We were going to stop off in China, and just as we're heading toward China, the government collapsed. Chiang Kai-shek, and was driven over into Taiwan, and consequently we had to go right over to Tokyo and not stop in China. Otherwise we'd be interred there. And so here's the South China Sea heading toward Japan. And we entered Yokohama, and it's interesting, all the ships out there. There's the CL-83, that's a cruiser, the light cruiser. Manchester was at anchor in Yokohama Harbor. Also, there's the hospital ship USNS Repose. Here we are. This is the USNS General Simon B. Buckner. Who was Simon B. Buckner?
Guy killed on Okinawa, wasn't he?
Yep.
That's right, he was the
Commanding General,
commander at
10th Army.
Okinawa, was killed. This is the transport named after him. That's me standing in front of the boat, age 5. That's our docking space at Yokohama. And next thing, we went to Grant Heights, which is the compound for the military people and the families. And we can see there's our quarters there. That's what the housing looked like. Here's the look from our upper window. There's Mount Fuji over the rest of the
Wow.
the buildings, and it's quite close to Tokyo, as shown there. Then our car finally arrived, and this is one license plate I wish I had. It says Japanese. It says occupation, Japan occupation, right below it, and that's our '47 Packard. My dad really loved that car, and here he is polishing it, getting it all souped up. But at the time, there were only American cars being driven around Tokyo. That was it. There was some Japanese vehicles running on coal gas, not gasoline, coal gas. And shown, the next one is the Daiichi Insurance Building, right? And that's the moat in front of the Emperor's Palace, and that's MacArthur's headquarters. And it was relatively undamaged because they did mostly firebombing prior to the nuclear bomb. And that just burned down the wooden structures, but most of the masonry structures survived. My dad was assigned to MacArthur Staff G4, which is supply. His job was to make sure that the fuel and goods and everything could be brought in as soon as possible to revive the economy, which was in shambles at the time. There was really nothing going on. He had a '41 Cadillac staff car from 1948 to 49. You can always recognize it right there. And so every time MacArthur left the building, all of these Japanese citizens would be crowded all over the place to see him, because by this time he was kind of revered, because he was trying to get the economy going. He wasn't beating up everybody like the Japanese did to other countries, and so it was quite a change. And so the Japanese really appreciated him, and they wanted to see him, and there'd be nothing less than like 1,000 to 1,500 people there just trying to watch him get into his car. That's General Mack, and then his aide was Colonel Bunker, the guy on the right there. And the general always walked out and he wore this khaki cap that he got from Emmanuel Quezon when he was the ruler sort of the Philippines. And Emmanuel Quezon, who's the president of the Philippines, sort of called him like a Caesar and gave him this really fancy hat, which we wore all the time. And there he is getting into his car with Colonel Bunker. And the general would often take a siesta around 2 to 3, and then come back and work to 8 or 9 in the evening. Well, if you were an officer in his staff, you don't get to have no siesta. You had to stay there, and then stay all the way to 8 or 9 o'clock. He was nicknamed SCAP, Supreme Commander Allied Pacific. And so they often referred to him as SCAP. And then here he is coming out again. There's his staff car, the General MacArthur Bunker in the winter uniform. This is fall of 1949. And he always seemed to, whenever I saw him, march with a presence. He just marched, like he was, he had a vision or something, He had a lot of military bearing, at least I noticed as a kid. And never wore any medals or anything, but he always had that cap. That was pretty cool. Now here's Tokyo in front of his office at that time frame, and no cars other than American. There's a few rickshaws or anything like that, but no Japanese cars at all. The fuel was pretty short, and the economy was barely recovering. The trolleys were running though, you can see. And then here is the Japanese Imperial Staff Headquarters. Now, right after the war, MacArthur abolished the Japanese military, and it was cleaned out. No military people at all from the Japanese military higher ups. And this was their headquarters, and it was badly damaged from bombing, so apparently it was a target during World War II, because toward the end of the war, they actually moved the headquarters to the mountains because it kept getting hit, so the building is still in disrepair like that. Here's the rice paddies were pretty much going full bore. You can see the honey buckets out there. Honey bucket is where they put the human waste to fertilize the rice. And so we used to call them honey buckets. And then here's downtown Tokyo, mostly shanties along the road, you know, people selling stuff because a lot of the wood structure was still being rebuilt. That had burned down unbelievably. If you look at the incendiary bombings of Japan, it just burned the whole city down other than some of the masonry buildings. And then here's my mom and my brother and me shopping at Yokohama. And so we went, we went into the store, and the lady serving at the counter turned her back to us. And the manager quickly came over and got someone else to help us. So there was still some resentment at the time of the Americans, but most of them seemed to treat us pretty much okay because we weren't treating them very badly either. And the emperor's word was gospel, and anybody that thought the Americans shouldn't be there was essentially told not to bother the Americans by the emperor. And so the emperor had a lot of authority, and the people followed him. And around Christmas time, right in front of our house, Santa would arrive in an L5 observation plane. The plane would fly in, he'd land right on the road in front of the house, and us kids would rush up and get our presents. You know, he had them in the plane.
That's an L5 there, isn't it?
Huh?
That's
That's an L3.
L3.
Yeah, so, and then you jump back in the plane and off you go. They clear the road and you take it right off. Here's a picture of Japanese trucks running on coal gas. You can burn coal and run it through a reactor and get gas that's combustible. And it'll run the engine. It was a smoky mess. The oil would get crapped out. It was really an awful system, but if you didn't have any other fuel, that's what they used. And they finally settled, you know, with the gasoline coming in the future years there. And then all the women, you know, the officers, the first thing they do is buy a kimono when they go to Japan. And of course, all the Japanese women wanted to buy Western dress, you know, it was sort of like almost a trade. But everybody had a kimono, and they all thought that was pretty cool. And then finally, my dad got orders to go to stateside. And so we boarded the troop ship USNS Shanks and headed east, and that was the end of our trip to Japan. 3, 2, 1, suck it in.
Took a picture before.
The National Society of the American Revolution, Rochelle, Illinois chapter, join a grateful nation to honor Master Sergeant William Bijou, United States Army, in recognition of valor, service, and sacrifice during the Vietnam War.
Who's this? Marines. Marines. That's General over there. Were you Marines? You're Army.
You gotta remember, the Marines are part of the Navy, so no sailing.
Hello.
You got to get rid of all this stuff. My stuff. I have 3 big
Did you
boards
get
of
that?
this.
I know
Stuff.
the feeling.
I just learned how to talk again.
I
Stuff.
moved in, but you got to get rid of all your stuff.
Stuff.
Stuff.